Shalom, my friends. Here we are back to the Book of Hanok, chapter 83, Dreams. And now, my son Methuselah, I will show you all my visions which I have seen, recounting them before you. 2 visions I saw before I took a wife, and the one was quite unlike the other. The first, when I was learning to write. The second, before I took your mother, I saw a terrible vision, and regarding them, I prayed to Yahweh. I had laid down in the house of my grandfather, Hallowed. I saw in a vision how the Shamayim collapsed and was taken away and fell to the earth. And when it fell to the earth, I saw how the earth was swallowed up in a great abyss, and mountains were suspended on mountains, and hills sank down on hills, and high trees were torn from their stems and hurled down and sunk in the abyss. And after that, a word fell into my mouth, and I lifted up to cry aloud and said, "The earth is destroyed." And my grandfather, Hallowed, woke me as I lay near him and said to me, "Why do you cry so, my son? And why do you make such lamentation?" And I recounted to him the whole vision which I had seen, and he said unto me, "A terrible matter you have seen, my son, and of grave moment is your vision. As to the secrets of all the sin of the earth, it must sink into the abyss and be destroyed with a great destruction. And now, my son, arise and make petition to Yahweh of esteem, since you are a believer, that a remnant may remain on the earth, and that he may not destroy the whole earth. My son, from the Shamayim all this will come upon the earth, and upon the earth there will be great destruction." After that I arose and prayed and implored and pleaded and wrote down my prayer for the generations of the world, and I will show all matters to you, my son Methuselah. And when I had gone forth below, and seen the Shamayim, and the sun rising in the east, and the moon going down in the west, and a few stars, and the whole earth, and all as he had known it in the beginning, then I barak Yahweh of right ruling, and exalted him, because he had made the sun to go forth from the windows of the east, and he ascended and rose on the face of the Shamayim, and departed, and kept traversing the path shown unto him. Chapter 84. And I lifted up my hands in righteousness, and barak the Kodesh and Great One, and spoke with the breath of my mouth, and with the tongue of flesh, which Elohim has made for the children of the flesh of men, that they should speak with, and he gave them breath and a tongue and a mouth that they should speak with. Baruch are you, O Adon, sovereign, great and mighty in your greatness, Adon of the whole creation of the Shamayim, sovereign of sovereigns, and Elohim of the whole world, and your power and reign and greatness abide forever and ever, and throughout all generations. Your dominion and all the Shamayim are your throne forever, and the whole earth your footstool forever and ever. For you have made, and you rule all, and no matter is too hard for you. Wisdom does not depart from the place of your throne, nor turn away from your presence. And you know and see and hear all matters, and there is none hidden from you, for you see all. And now the messengers of your Shamayim are guilty of trespass, and upon the flesh of men your wrath abides until the great day of judgment. And now, O Elohim and Adon and great sovereign, I implore and pray to fulfill my prayer, to leave me a posterity on earth, and not destroy all the flesh of man, and make the earth without inhabitant, so that there should be an eternal destruction. And now, Adonai, destroy from the earth the flesh which has aroused your wrath, but the flesh of righteousness and uprightness establish as a plant of the eternal seed, and do not hide your face from the prayer of your servant, O Yahweh. Chapter 85. And after this I saw another dream, and I will show the whole dream to you, my son. And Hanok lifted up and spoke to his son Methuselah. To you, my son, will I speak. Hear my words. Incline your ear to the vision of your father. Before I took your mother, Edna, I saw in a vision on my bed, and see, a bull came forth from the earth, and the bull was white, and after it came forth a heifer. And along with this came forth two bulls, one of them black and the other red. And the black bull gored the red one and pursued him over the earth, and I could no longer see the red bull. But the black bull grew, and the heifer went with him, and I saw that many oxen proceeded from him, which resembled and followed him. And the cow, the first one, went from the presence of the first bull in order to seek the red one, but did not find, and lamented with a great lamentation over him, and sought him. And I looked till the first bull came to her and quieted her. And from that time onward she cried no more. And after that she bore another white bull, and after him she bore many bulls and black cows. And I saw in my sleep the white bull likewise grow and become a great white bull, and from him proceeded many white bulls, and they resembled him, and they began to bring forth many white bulls, which resembled them, one following the other, very many. Chapter 86. And again I saw with my eyes as I slept, and I saw the Shamayim above, and see, a star fell from the Shamayim, and it arose and ate and pastured amongst those oxen. And after that I saw the large and the black oxen, and see, they all changed their stalls and pastures and their cattle, and began to live with each other. And again I saw in the vision, and looked towards the Shamayim, and see, I saw many stars descend and cast themselves down from the Shamayim to the first star. And they became bulls amongst those cattle, and pastured with them amongst them. And I looked at them and saw, and see, they all let out their members like horses, and began to cover the cows of the oxen, and they all became pregnant, and brought forth elephants, camels, and asses. And all the oxen feared them, and were frightened at them, and began to bite with their teeth, and to devour, and to gore with their horns. And they began also to devour those oxen, and see, all the children of the earth began to tremble and quake before them, and to flee from them. Chapter 87. And again I saw how they began to gore each other, and to devour each other, and the earth began to cry aloud. And I raised my eyes again to the Shamayim, and I saw in the vision, and see, there came forth from the Shamayim beings who were like white men, and 4 went forth from that place, and 3 with them. And those 3 that had last come forth grabbed me by my hand, and took me up away from the generations of the earth, and raised me up to a high place, and showed me a tower raised high above the earth, and all the hills were lower. And one said to me, Remain here till you see all that befalls those elephants, camels, and asses, and the stars and the oxen, and all of them. Chapter 88. And I saw one of those four who had come forth first, and he seized the first star which had fallen from the Shamayim, and bound it hand and foot, and cast it into an abyss. Now the abyss was narrow and deep and horrible and dark. Remember how I said earlier, the word star or stars is interchangeable with messenger or messengers, with malach or malachim. Obviously, bound hand and foot. This is not literally a star, although it could also literally be a star that represents the fallen one that's being talked of here. Verse 1 again. And I saw one of those four who had come forth first, and he seized the first star which had fallen from the Shamayim, and bound it hand and foot, and cast it into an abyss. Now the abyss was narrow and deep and horrible and dark. And one of them drew a sword, and gave it to those elephants and camels and asses. Then they began to smite each other, and the whole earth quaked because of them. And as I was watching in the vision, see, one of those four who had come forth, thrown from the Shamayim, and gathered and took all the great stars whose members were like those of horses, and bound them all hand and foot, and cast them in an abyss of the earth. Chapter 89. And one of those four went to the white bull and instructed him in a secret, without being terrified. He was born a bull, and became a man, and built for himself a great vessel, and dwelt upon it. And 3 bulls dwelt with him in the vessel, and they were covered in. And again I raised my eyes towards the Shamayim, and saw a high roof, with 7 water torrents upon them. And those torrents flowed with much water into an enclosure. And I saw again, and see, fountains were opened on the surface of the great enclosure. And the water began to swell and rise upon the surface. And I saw the enclosure till all its surface was covered with water. And the water, the darkness, and mist increased upon it. And as I looked at the height of the water had risen above the height of the enclosure, and was streaming over the enclosure, and it stood upon the earth. And all the cattle of the enclosure were gathered together, until I saw how they sank, and were swallowed up, and perished in the water. But the vessel floated on the water, while all the oxen and elephants and camels and asses sank to the bottom with all the animals, so that I could no longer see them, and they were not able to escape, perished and sunk to the depths. And again I saw in the vision, till those water torrents were removed from the high roof, and the chasms of the earth were leveled up, and other abysses were opened. Then the water began to run down into these, till the earth became visible, but the vessel rested on the earth, and the darkness withdrew, and light appeared. But the white bull, which had become a man, came out of the vessel, and the 3 bulls with him. And one of those 3 was white like the bull, and one of them was red as blood, and one black. And the white bull departed from them. And they began to bring forth beasts of the field and birds, so that there arose different kinds: lions, tigers, wolves, dogs, hyenas, wild boars, foxes, squirrels, pigs, hawks, vultures, eagles, and ravens. And among them was born a white bull. And they began to bite one another. But that white bull which was born amongst them brought forth a wild ass, and a white bull with it, and the wild asses multiplied. But the bull which was born from him brought forth a black wild boar and a white sheep, and the former brought forth many boars, but the sheep brought forth 12 sheep. Remember, this is a dream that he's sharing. And when those 12 sheep had grown, they gave up one of them to the asses, and those asses again gave up that sheep to the wolves, and the sheep grew up among the wolves. And the Adon brought the 11 sheep to live with it, and to pasture with it among the wolves, and they multiplied and became many flocks of sheep. And the wolves began to terror them, and they oppressed them until they cried aloud on account of their little ones, and to complain unto their Adon. And a sheep which had been saved from the wolves fled and escaped to the wild asses. And I saw the sheep how they lamented and cried, and pleaded their Adon with all their might, till that Adon of the sheep descended at the voice of the sheep from a high abode, and came to them, and pastured them. And he called the sheep which had escaped the wolves, and spoke with it concerning the wolves, that it should warn them not to touch the sheep. And the sheep went to the wolves according to the word of the Adon, and another sheep met it, and went with it, and the two went and entered together into the assembly of those wolves, and spoke with them, and warned them not to touch the sheep from here on. And after that I saw the wolves, and how they oppressed the sheep exceedingly with all their power, and the sheep cried aloud. And the Adon came to the sheep, and they began to smite those wolves, and the wolves began to make lamentation, but the sheep became quiet, and immediately ceased to cry out. And I saw the sheep till they departed from amongst the wolves, but the eyes of the wolves were blinded, and the wolves departed in pursuit of the sheep with all their might. And the Adon of the sheep went with them as their leader, and all his sheep followed him, and his face was dazzling and magnificent and awesome to look upon. But the wolves began to pursue the sheep till they reached a sea of water, and the sea was divided, and the water stood on this side and on that before their face, and their Adon left them and placed himself between them and the wolves. And as the wolves did not yet see the sheep, they proceeded into the midst of the sea, and the wolves followed the sheep, and the wolves ran after them into the sea. And when they saw the Adon of the sheep, they turned to flee before his face, but the sea gathered itself together and became as it had been created, and the water swelled and rose till it covered the wolves. Story sounding familiar to you yet? Verse 27, and I saw till all the wolves who pursued the sheep perished and were drowned. But the sheep escaped from the water and went forth into a wilderness where there was no water and no grass. And they began to open their eyes and to see. And I saw the Adon of the sheep pasturing them and giving them water and grass, and that sheep going and leading them. And that sheep ascended to the summit of that high rock, and the Adon of the sheep sent it to them. And after that I saw the Adon of the sheep who stood before them, and his appearance was great and awesome and majestic, and all the sheep saw him and were afraid before his face. And they all feared and trembled because of him, and they cried to that sheep with them which was amongst them, saying, We are not able to stand before our Adon or to look upon him. And that sheep which led them again ascended to the summit of the rock, but the sheep began to be blinded and to wander from the way which he had showed them, but that sheep was not thereof. And the Adon of the sheep was wrathful exceedingly against them. And that sheep discovered it, and went down from the summit of the rock, and came to the sheep, and found the greatest part of them blinded and fallen away. And when they saw it, they feared and trembled at its presence, and desired to return to their folds. And that sheep took other sheep with it, and came to those sheep which had fallen away, and began to slay them. And the sheep feared its presence. And thus that sheep brought back those sheep that had fallen away, and they returned to their folds. And I saw in this vision till that sheep became a man, and built a house for the Adon of the sheep, and placed all the sheep in the house. And I saw till this sheep which had met that sheep which led them fell asleep. And I saw till all the great sheep perished, and little ones arose in their place. And they came to a pasture, and approached a stream of water. Then that sheep, their leader, which had become a man, withdrew from them and fell asleep. And all the sheep sought it, and cried over it with a great crying. And I saw till they ceased crying for that sheep, and crossed the stream of water. And there arose the two sheep as leaders in the place of those which had led them and fallen asleep. And I saw till the sheep came to a pleasant place, and a pleasant and magnificent land. And I saw till those sheep were satisfied, and the house stood amongst them in the pleasant land. And sometimes their eyes were opened, and sometimes blinded, till another sheep arose and led them, and brought them all back, and their eyes were opened. And the dogs and the foxes and the wild boars began to devour those sheep, till the Adon of the sheep raised up another sheep, a ram from their midst, which led them. And the ram began to butt on either side of those dogs, foxes, and wild boars, till he had destroyed them all. And that sheep whose eyes were opened saw the ram which was amongst the sheep, till it forsook its esteem, and began to butt those sheep, and trampled upon them, and behaved itself indecently. And the Adon of the sheep sent the lamb to another lamb, and raised it to being a ram and leader of the sheep, instead of that ram which had forsaken its esteem. And it went to it, and spoke to it alone, and raised it to being a ram, and made it the prince and leader of the sheep. But during all these, those dogs oppressed the sheep. And the first ram pursued the second ram, and the second ram arose and fled before it. And I saw till the dogs pulled down the first ram, and the second ram arose and led the little sheep. And those sheep grew and multiplied, but all the dogs and foxes and wild boars feared and fled before it. And the ram butted and killed the wild beasts, and those wild beasts had no longer any power among the sheep, and robbed them no more. And the ram brought forth many sheep, and fell asleep. And a little sheep became a ram in its place, and became prince and leader of those sheep. And the house became great and broad, and it was built for those sheep. A tower high and great was built on the house for the Adon of the sheep. And the house was low, but the tower was elevated and high. And the Adon of the sheep stood on the tower, and they offered a full table before him. And again I saw the sheep, that they again strayed, and went many ways, and forsook that their house. And the Adon of the sheep called some from amongst the sheep, and sent them to the sheep, but the sheep began to slay them. And one of them was saved, and was not slain, and it sped away, and cried aloud over the sheep, and they sought to slay it, but the Adon of the sheep saved it from the sheep, and brought it up to me, and caused it to dwell there. And many other sheep he sent to those sheep, to testify unto them, and lament over them. And after that I saw that when they forsook the house of the Adon and his tower, they fell away entirely, and their eyes were blinded. And I saw the Adon of the sheep how he wrought much slaughter amongst them in their herds, until those sheep invited that slaughter and betrayed his place. And he gave them over into the hands of the lions and tigers, and wolves and hyenas, and into the hand of the foxes, and to all the wild beasts. And those wild beasts began to tear in pieces those sheep. And I saw that he forsook their house and their tower, and gave them all into the hand of the lions, to tear and devour them into the hand of all the wild beasts. And I began to cry aloud with all my might, and to appeal to the Adon of the sheep, and to represent to him in regard to the sheep, that they were devoured by all the wild beasts. But he remained unmoved, though he saw it, and rejoiced that they were devoured, and swallowed, and robbed, and left them to be devoured in the hand of all the beasts. And he called 70 shepherds, and cast those sheep to them, that they might pasture them. And he spoke to the shepherds and their companions, "Let each individual of you pasture the sheep hereon, and all that I shall command you, that do. And I will deliver them over to you, duly numbered, and tell you which of them are to be destroyed, and them you destroy." And he gave over to them those sheep. And he called another and spoke to him, "Observe and mark all that the shepherds will do to the sheep, for they will destroy more of them than I have commanded them. And every excess and the destruction which will be wrought through the shepherds, record how many they destroy according to my command, and how many according to their own desire. Record against every individual shepherd all the destruction he effects. And read out before me by number how many they destroy, and how many they deliver over for destruction, that I may have this as a witness against them, and know every deed of the shepherds, that I may know and see what they do, whether or not they live by my command, which I have commanded them. But they shall not know it, and you shall not declare it to them, nor admonish them, but only record against each individual all the destruction which the shepherds effect, each in his time, and lay it all before me. And I saw till the shepherds pastured in their season, and they began to slay and to destroy more than they were ordered. And they delivered the sheep into the hand of the lions. And the lions and tigers ate and devoured the greater part of the sheep. And the wild boars ate along with them. And they burnt the tower and demolished the house. And I became exceedingly sorrowful over the tower, because the house of the sheep was demolished. And afterwards I was unable to see if the sheep entered the house. And the shepherds and their associates delivered over the sheep to all the wild beasts to devour them, and each one of them received in his time a definite number. It was written by the other in a book how many each of them destroyed of them. And each one slew and destroyed many more than was prescribed, and I began to weep and lament on account of those sheep. And thus in the vision I saw the one who wrote, how he wrote down every one that was destroyed by those shepherds day by day, and carried up and laid down and even shadowed the whole book to the Adon of the sheep, all that they had done, and all that each one of them had made away with, and all that they had given over to destruction. And the book was read before the Adon of the sheep, and he took the book from his hand, and read it, and sealed it, and laid it down. And immediately I saw how the shepherds pastured for 12 hours, and see, 3 of those sheep turned back, and came and entered, and began to build up all that had fallen down of the house. But the wild boars tried to prevent them, but they were not able. And they began again to build as before, and they raised up the tower, and it was named the High Tower. And they began again to place a table before the tower, but all the bread on it was polluted and not pure. And as regarding all this, the eyes of the sheep were blinded, so that they did not see, and their shepherds likewise, and they delivered them in large numbers to their shepherds for destruction, and they trampled the sheep with their feet, and devoured them. And the adon of the sheep remained unmoved, till all the sheep were dispersed over the field, and mingled with them, and they did not save them out of the hand of the beasts. And the one who wrote the book carried it up, and showed it, and read it before the adon of the sheep, and implored him on their account, and pleaded with him on their account, as he showed him all the doings of the shepherds, and gave witness before him against all the shepherds. And he took the actual book and laid it down beside him and departed. We'll stop there and pick up. There's just one more chapter for dreams, but it's a couple of pages long, so I'm going to stop there. We'll pick up next time with chapter 90. Shalom.